I'm Lesley-Ann Jones. I was a Fleet Street journalist for about 20 years and a showbiz writer. So I went on the road with lots of bands and got to know artists. That was the best training, really, for doing what I do now, which is to write books about artists. And biographies have been my thing for about the last 12 years or so. I've written biographies of Freddie Mercury, Mark Bolan, David Bowie, and here we are with John Lennon. The most difficult book that I've written to date, but the most rewarding in lots of ways as well.
Now, the title of the book is The Lives, Loves and Deaths of the Greatest Rock Star, and obviously John Lennon. What intrigued me was it's not the life, loves and death, but you put the two of those words that don't usually go in the plural, the lives and deaths. So why did you put them in the plural?
Because John lived many lives, he had many loves, and he died several deaths before that fateful night when the 4 bullets hit him and he was killed by Mark Chapman. But he had killed off various versions of his earlier selves before that. And I was intrigued when I came across these several conflicting versions of John. Which one was the original? And I traced them right back. I wanted to know who was the first John Lennon, who was the real John Lennon, if you like, and at what point and what caused him to die. And why did John relinquish his original self to become various incarnations of who he was, but who he wasn't really? What was the journey there? That's the modern word, isn't it, that we use? But I wanted to trace that right back and to find the true John.
How would you define or how would you describe the real John?
Quite a dysfunctional, bitter person at odds with life. He had a massive void to fill. The reason he became a creative, a musician, a songwriter, because he was constantly trying to fill that huge void within him, which had been caused by abandonment. His father ran off when he was a baby, went to sea, never came back until John was world famous. And there was a fortune to tap into. His mother gave him away to her elder sister, his Auntie Mimi, who brought him up. And he was deprived of a relationship with his own mom, Julia, when he could have actually known her all those years because she lived only a little more than a mile away from Mimi's house. And he could have had much more to do with his birth mother than he really did. So when he found that out, he was pretty angry. And Mimi was a difficult person. She wasn't very affectionate. She had no idea how to handle children. Kids need lots of love and physical affection. They need a bedtime story. They need somebody to button up their pajamas and teach them how to brush their teeth and all of those things. It's a very hands-on thing, looking after a little child. But John didn't get any of that. And so he kind of knew that he wasn't getting what he should. And it made him difficult. It made him at odds with authority, for example. So he was in the choir at the local church, but he soon got kicked out. He was the ringleader whenever there was mischief going on. He misbehaved terribly at school. He drew cartoons and wrote little spiteful speech bubbles coming out of teachers' mouths and circulated his own newspaper at school, the Daily Howl, which really sent up everybody, not in a funny and gentle and affectionate way, but always quite a spiteful way. And it seemed as though John had lots of scores to settle. And he carried that personality through into his adult life and really took it into the Beatles. So we know that John was the kind of Beatle who at the press conferences would be chewing gum, smoking a cigarette, making little asides, wisecracks. They all had that Liverpool personality, the sort of very easy humor and quite sardonic jokes that they would tell and so on. And of course, America found them a breath of fresh air. But John, there was always an edge to him. There was always a side, and it was quite nasty. And he was always violent as well, especially to women, to those weaker than him. He was a bully at school. And so all of those things made quite a complex character for whom music was an escape, for whom songwriting was an outlet to really work out himself and to write slogans, which is pretty much what his songwriting amounted to. Paul was the much more creative songwriter, and John knew that. So he resented McCartney for that as well, while also knowing that he had to let McCartney into his band to raise the band's game. Otherwise, he would have been sabotaging his own group.
What do you
So there
think
was a lot there to contend with, wasn't there?
What do you think made John such an attractive, appealing figure to the public, though?
Well, he was very good looking. He had a charm about him. He performed well on stage. He was tall and slender, and he had that cheeky glint in his eye and that little wink that he would aim at people. And I think he was very visually appealing. Girls certainly found him attractive. And he stood out. He wore his guitar very high on his body, and he had a stance on stage. He looked different from other pop stars of the era. And there just seemed something a little bit more dangerous about John, I think.
What was the kind of turning point in his life? Did he ever settle down and become more of a kind of well-rounded human being, or was he always like that?
I believe it's when he met Yoko, who was the love of his life. They met in the middle, and he never treated Yoko the way he treated his previous wife, previous girlfriends, because she would never have allowed him to. They met, and that was it. They both said it was love at first sight, whatever that is, the spark, the thing that, that feeling, you almost feel that you've known that person in a former life, that you've been together some time before. Everything fell into place. It was a foregone conclusion. But she said to him, "You won't treat me the way you've treated your previous females. I won't, the minute you hit me the first time, I'm out the door." She made him a feminist. She made him a much more decent human being. She was very educated, Yoko, in a way that John wasn't. And she was cultured. She was musical. She played the piano. She'd had a tertiary education, which he hadn't had. And she raised his game. There was a lot to look up to. She was exactly the kind of female he needed to be with, not somebody that he would soon have contempt for because he looked down on them because they were less than him. He needed somebody to look up to. So, and of course, Yoko was 8 years older, and so she was a mother figure as well. He even called her mother. And people said, "Oh, well, that's a northern male thing. Men always call the woman of the household mother." But it was more than that. She was a very maternal figure in his life.
John Lennon is one of those people, one of those few people who were assassinated or murdered, who everybody knows where they were when they heard that he had passed on or been shot. What do you think the reason for that is? Why is he such an icon?
Because his influence went way beyond the music. He was an activist. He was a troublemaker. He stood up for things. We heard his voice in lots of situations. Paul McCartney was never political, was he? He was a mild songwriter compared to John. John, as I said before, wrote slogans. The peace movement, which he and Yoko championed the cause of, that was really the start of it all. But people latched onto him, and also he latched onto other people because they realized they could use John's fame and his fortune to some extent and his global impact to bring attention to their own causes. And John liked that because he felt that pop had become a very throwaway, very disposable, and it wasn't really important, didn't have a voice. So to use his profile for what he regarded as more important causes became a mission for him.
Just to wrap up, you call the book "The Lives, Loves and Deaths of the Greatest Rock Star Who Killed John Lennon." Why did you call him the greatest rock star?
I don't think he's been superseded. I think, we've got lots of them, haven't we? Where do you start? Robert Plant, Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger to some extent. We still have those people. I believe that John, who died only about halfway through his life, obviously he didn't know he was going to die. He wasn't ready to die. He was anything but ready to go. He was at a really good point in his life. He had the woman of his dreams. They had a little child together, Sean. He was back making music. They'd got Double Fantasy out, which was a groundbreaking album in its way because it was 50% John, 50% Yoko. A lot of people criticized that. She wasn't liked. But there are some great cuts on that album. And people have said, well, it became a much bigger album than it was going to because of the fact that he died. But take a song like Watching the Wheels with that great slogan in it, I just had to let it go. He's telling us that he is in the best place he's ever been in his life. He let go the Beatles, the Fabs, the past, all of the mayhem and the madness, and he's now in a good place. He's found the answers. We always want, people look to rock stars, don't they? Because they think they have all the answers, especially when we're teenagers, because we listen to the songs, we take on board the lyrics, and we think, oh, they know the secret of life. They know what it's all about. But of course, musicians write songs to try and find the answers. I truly believe that John found his answers.